Her daddy died when she was just 2, 3 years old. I've got a real good picture of him. He's one of those black-headed Irishmen. This letter comes from a lady who lives in Fort Worth, Texas, and her name is Janice Minor Jernberg, 9315 son of Dallas, Texas. All right, I'll read you the letter. My husband, William Curtis Jernberg, is the great-grandson of A.P. Jernberg, father of Miss Molly Jernberg. We have recently become interested in accumulating as much family history as we can. In April, we came to Water Valley and found the markers of A.P. and Mary Virginia Jernberg. Then we went to the office of the North Mississippi Herald and encountered very kind, helpful people who helped us find the obituary of A.P. Jernberg, and the following week they sent us by mail a copy of Miss Molly's obituary. While at the Herald office, we received a copy of a bicentennial look at the American progress found in Yallowbush County and the city of Water Valley, and we also received your name as someone who knew Miss Molly and might be able to help us. Well, I didn't really. I just knew her when I saw her. I have left space for your answer beside the questions in an attempt to use as little of your time as possible. We sincerely thank you for your help. Question 1. Obituary of A.P. Jernberg states deceased was born in Sweden, but his parents came to America when he was a small lad. He had spent the greater portion of his lifetime in Water Valley. Item under that, A. Did Aunt Molly know where in Sweden her father was born?
She might have, but I don't know.
No, I can't imagine. Somebody would have had to have talked to her, you see, to have gotten that information.
You might get that from Lois Myers. She
All right.
Molly's daily visit.
All right. Across the street there.
Yeah.
She's been right there for 40 years, hasn't she? So
She's been there longer than 40 years.
Yeah. All right, I've got her.
She's been there 50 years.
Ms. Myers is. She was a Jeans, right? That's right. Lois Jean. And that's the only marriage Tom Myers ever had, isn't it? Okay. Item B. Did Aunt Molly know any of the below about her father or grandfather? Now, this is going to be hard. Date of arrival, port of entry. You never heard of any of those things. And I didn't either. Where was naturalized, ship's name, names of other members of immigrant family. Well, I believe you told me one time that a whole group of these people came at the same time. Is that correct?
That's right. The old cotton mill up there had been built, but the steam had stood some years without any machinery in it.
Yeah.
And they domiciled that Swedish colony in there. That old Mr. Berglund went back to Sweden and brought over here.
Oh. Well, Berglund was already here when that cotton mill was formulated. He was in on the founding, wasn't he?
Mr. Berglund, yes, Mr. Berglund had a blind door and sash mill on that property 1 block from Central Street over there where the Second Baptist Church is located.
Yeah. A blind door and sash mill.
And he went to Sweden and brought a whole colony of Swedes here. And I think Mr. Berglund said, Mr. Jernberg said they spent their first winter up there in that, domiciled in that factory building.
Yeah. Well, I have read or heard that the first year they were here, the living conditions were such as a lot of them died.
They did, and they tell me they buried them up there on that hill east of the factory. There was a place up there that was known as the Swede Graveyard.
Oh, really?
There's no monuments up there. There may be some rocks placed, but no
I
monuments.
sure didn't know that. Who owns that property?
I really don't know.
Well, I might follow that up possibly.
I suspect it belongs to that Mrs. Larrymore.
Oh,
She lives in the old Aunt Susan Robinson home.
Yeah.
And I think that land's next behind.
Uh-huh. Why did AP and his parents come to America? Because Mr. Bergman went and got them, I imagine.
He brought a whole colony.
Yeah.
Like all of them, they came hunting better living conditions, better work opportunities.
Did they come straight to Water Valley? Well, we don't know. We don't have any way of knowing that.
Those Swedes did. That colony Swedes, Mr. Baker, Billy Baker, I think, told me that those Swedes came in 1868. They got unloading first up there by the paint shop and how all the Volkswagen shop went up there to see the Swedes.
1868. Now that's by the time the shop. Of course, they started building that shop in '66, but it was pretty well in operation by then. But I wonder if they were brought here to work in the shop or to work in that cotton mill, or both.
Well, not the cotton mill, because it didn't have it. Some of them already worked for Mr. Burton, and some of them worked for the railroad.
Yeah.
Because it was a philanthropic move on his part.
Yeah.
He would have brought them here together to have better opportunities.
Well, do you know what Elizabeth Cook over yonder in that office, working for Miss Dixie over yonder, and came up with this document right here, and I'm going to read this to you. It's in 1868. A.G. Buford et al. Contract G. Berglund et al. Filed for record 7/1/1869 and so forth. J.B. Townsend, clerk. Memorandum of an agreement made and entered into the 7th day of August 1868 between G. Berglund and his associates of the first part and A.G. Buford, M.D.L. Stevens, L.M. Lawshay, J.H. Wilson, M.E. Abbey, P.D. Wood, Jesse Addington, John McFarland, C.T. Hope, N.N. McCord, officers and directors of the Agricultural and Mechanical Association of Water Valley, and their duly elected successors in office of the second part. The said Berglund and Associates agreed for the hereinafter mentioned consideration to furnish suitable ground for a fairground within or near the corporate limits of the town, which location shall be approved of by the Board of Directors of said association, and which may not exceed 4 acres. Said Berglund and Associates further agreed to erect upon the ground such buildings, stables, stalls, and stands as the Board of Directors may direct from year to year, and to enclose the whole ground with a good plank fence 8 feet high, with necessary gates and openings. Said Berglund and Associates further agrees to erect a stand in front of the amphitheater for the accommodation of the officers, directors, and musicians, 2 stories high, to be well covered and furnished with suitable stairways and seats. Said Berglund and Associates further agreed to erect suitable seats within a circle in the form of an amphitheater large enough to contain 1,000 persons, and suitable cover the same. All of which improvements are to be completed by the 15th of October of next 1869. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
No.
A fairground. And I've just wondered if that wasn't the park, the North End Park.
Well, I don't know. Ms. Molly Buford Wagner gave that part to the city. That's on the condition of it be maintained as a public park.
Molly Buford Wagner. Mr. Dan.
A.G. Buford's daughter, she was.
Yeah.
No, she was Mr. Will Wagner's widow. You might remember Ms. Wagner. Wagner lived over there on Wagner Street up on the hill north of the street. And she lived a long ways from the street. But back up on that hill. She lived directly west of Charlie Murray's on the next hill over there.
Oh, yeah. I'd forgotten there was a house over there. Yeah. Back over behind Thompson's, over on that next hill.
Those houses were not there.
No.
That was the edge of Miss Wagner's
Property.
grove lot.
Yeah.
She lived in a big wooded grove.
Uh-huh.
Now this old man Berglund, was also a builder. He built Miss Hyde's house over here, Dr. Simmons.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
And he built Miss Connie Mays' house. And I don't know what else he built, but he was a builder.
Well, Elizabeth also found over there a document stating that Berglund had a night school here, and where young men were trained to work at trades. He did that also.
I didn't know that.
And I wondered if that...
Mr. Blackman, Edwin Blackman's father, was his bookkeeper up there at the blind over in Sashmill. Mr. Van James told me the main thing he was telling about Mr. Blackman having a big bulldog that came to work with him every day.
Yeah.
And stayed around the place all day and went home with him at night. And he came every day with him.
Well, I see. Well, that really amazed me. Of course, you heard of all these men. Who was L.M. Lawshay? Is he the man?
I think his name is Louis Lawshay.
Somebody got hit in the head, is buried up there in that cemetery, was killed by an employee.
Hit him with a big piece of timber, didn't he?
Yeah, a billet.
I believe you weren't. I heard tell like he was.
I believe it was Lawshay that was killed.
Wasn't he a merchant?
I think so.
I
Or operated a mill. I believe he operated a mill, and this man struck him with a billet. But I never heard of C.T. Hope, M.N. McCord.
H-O-P-E or H-O-P-T?
H-O-P-E.
McCord, I don't know anything about him.
How about this J.H. Wilson here?
I don't know who he was. I just wanted to see Miss Margaret's grandfather.
That's what I was thinking, because her mother was a Wilson, wasn't
He was.
she? She was, I do believe. All right. Did they work in the Yakni twine mills? Did the Swedish people work in the Yakni twine mills? I don't know.
I don't think so. Not the time, way back when I knew it. I knew that thing by 1910, 11. And none of the Swedes ever worked there. The Swedes worked for the railroad.
Yeah.
Mainly.
The twine mill mostly worked country people, didn't
I reckon they did. They maintained the lowest pay scale of anything around here.
Well,
all the Swedes, the older ones, Mr. Carlson and Mr. Eriksson and Mr. Cedarholm and on the corner of Main Street, Mr. Stroline and Highlander, Mr. Highlander. And Johnson, Mr. Charlie Johnson, he was a native Swede. He came with that group.
I want you to look at
And then Charlie Johnson's brother, who was Oscar Johnson's father, and he was also the father of the second Miss Janberg. Her name was
Nicolene. All right, now the first Miss Jernberg was a Wilson, and then the second one was a Johnson. That's right.
Oscar Johnson's sister, she and her parents. No. Yes, she and her parents and two little children were up in the old graveyard.
She and her parents and two little children.
Her little brothers or sisters.
Oh, Miss Molly.
No, that's the second Miss. That's Nicolene Jernberg.
Oh, I see. Did Miss Molly have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, she had several. Now, there's one man, they can get in touch with some of his people, maybe they can find out something on how they are descended to, she said, her husband. But you know, Dr. Jernberg, I think, lived at Sumner. If he didn't live at Sumner, he lived in the Sumner area.
No, he lived at Sumner. There's some Jernbergs over there now.
Lived at Sumner. But he was a son of A.P. Jernberg. And there was Dalma Jernberg. He was married to a Raglan. Their children died young. Two little children died. They had no other children. And Will Jernberg was mentally deficient. He was a son.
But Miss Molly was not raised with the Jernberg.
When her mother died, she was taken by the Lundquist. Oh, Mr. Lundquist, I don't know if his wife was living or not, but he had two maiden daughters, Miss Molly Lundquist and Miss Christina Lundquist, and he had a bachelor son, Gus Lundquist.
I've heard of him. I've heard that name, Gus Lundquist.
And they raised her, and Miss Molly was the last one to die, and she gave Miss Molly Jernberg that home.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just wonder what sustained Miss Molly. Did those doctors, I suppose, helped her, and maybe the Lundquist left her a little money or something? Because there wasn't any Social Security.
But she worked.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, she worked up there. She had a store for a while, and
Didn't
then
know.
closed that. She worked up there for Mr. Berry. Clay Berry, had a store right in there.
Oh, yeah, and I remember that.
Where Pee-wee's
Yeah.
restaurant is.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked for Clay Berry for a number of years. I imagine she retired on Social Security in the early days of it.
Well, she just might have. Wonder how old she was when she died. I don't remember reading her obituary. If she was 80.
Right about it.
Yeah.
She has a little stone marker up there that was erected some months after she died. I don't know by whom it was provided.
What lot is it?
Back in the, what's called a Swede graveyard.
Yeah.
Back there where the Carlson, Lynn Marks, and old man Bergland's family.
Mr. Berglund didn't live into your memory, did he? Gus Berglund?
No. His second wife, I think she was the second wife, was, the Pullens came here from Philadelphia with the railroad. Mr. George Pullman was a draftsman, and he laid out the railroad shop.
Well,
And he was Oscar Parsons'
wife's grandfather?
Oscar Parsons' mother's father by a second marriage. He had an older son, children.
Mm-hmm.
But the Pullmans lived, that crossing up there called Pullman's Crossing?
Yeah.
Well, George Pullman lived in that house, it's still there. But south of that, where Ms. A long time, Joe Feeney's mama lived there, where Miss Gray lived.
Yeah.
That was the old Pullman home site.
Oh, I was thinking it was the one there by the road.
That was George Pullman.
Well, where did Adam Pullman live?
Next place south. There used to be a mock orange line with fence between them.
I see. In other words, he lived out there where Miss Gray lived.
Yeah.
That's where the first meeting of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers in Water Valley, they had to meet kind of in secret, the company was after me. And I've got the minutes where they met at the home of Adam Pullman. He was an engineer.
I know he was. He finally got his foot smashed by the train down there, and that's where he died from.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They ran the Oak Hall Hotel a while. His second wife, first wife died in Philadelphia, I think, before he came down here. But what I started out to tell you, that Mr. Bergland's second wife was the Pullman's sister. She was the daughter of Adam Pullman, and her name was Mathella. And they called her Aunt Mathella, and she used to visit here. We lived next door to the Charlie Pullmans. And Aunt Mathella, let me see, Mr. Bergland died, and she married Richard Knox, Rick Knox's uncle.
Uh-huh.
And they all used to be very fond of Aunt Marcella. And I remember going over there with Roscoe and his wife and one or two of those children one Sunday to see Aunt Marcella. They lived at Sardis. And she was an old lady, about 82 or 3 years old, and was blind, totally blind.
Uh-huh.
Very nice looking old lady, but she had no eyesight at all.
Mm-hmm.
She's the only person I ever knew named Marcella.
I've never heard of that name. And you know, I thought the colored had thought of every combination of letters possible to name their kids. I've got a list of weird names over yonder in Charleston. You wouldn't believe. Mary, capital M-A-G-G-I-E, Maggie, capital L-E-A-N, Mary Magdalene Jones.
They were trying to say Mary Maggie. But I had a great grandmother who had a middle name I never been able to. Sounded like an Indian name to me. His mother. And she was Miss McMillan. First name was the name that I wanted. I say I can't trace was Muscatula.
Oh,
the middle name.
You know that's Indian.
And
Muscatula.
But I can't even come up with her first name that I'm supposed to. Anyhow, I don't know how she ever came to the name Muscatula. And she had a it was Grandma's sister. And one of her daughters was named Smithy, Caledonia, McMahon.
Smithy.
Smithy.
Smithy, Caledonia,
She got that
McMahon.
thing out in Grandma.
Where did they live?
In Montgomery County, out there from north,
Uh-huh.
southeast of, we called her Andonia. That's what her name was. Andonia, but her name was Caledonia.
Caledonia.
And
Well, now that back in those days, that name occurred once in a while.
I can't think of big grandma McMahon's first name, but I can't come up with it now. Muscatula was that name. I didn't know where she ever got it. There was an older Smithy, I believe her mother's name was Smithy. R-U-F-F, Ruff, Smithy Ruff.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, I wanted to go back to the Fulmer just a minute. Mr. Adam Fulmer, was he the second generation of Fulmers here? Was it his father who...
Adam Fulmer was the original.
He helped lay out the shop, is that?
His son, George, who lived next door to him now.
I see. He helped...
George was Miss Parsons and Miss
Cowan?
Cowan's father by his second marriage. They had an older brother, George Fulmer, who lived at Durant.
Yeah, I've heard of him. He was a foreman down there.
Yeah, and then he had a full sister who married an engineer, and I saw him one time as an old man came back here. Walter Powers. You ever hear him?
Yes, sir. You're the only person that's ever mentioned that man's name. He joined the Lodge way back in the 1880s.
You remember the old engineers used to be right clean cut in their manner of dress, and they never wore long hair. Mr. Art Smith on one I saw with long hair. He'd come down there driving that 1037, that white hair blowing out the back of his cap. But Walter Powers, when he was retired and an elderly man, when they came back here for their last visit, and he wore a bow tie and kept it tucked back up under the edges of his stiff collar.
Yeah.
You know, fold over collar.
Yeah.
And average size hat. But they lived possibly. They didn't build it either because John Chapman built it. The house where the Marcus lived.
Yeah.
And
You mean John Chapman built that house?
Not John Chapman you knew, but his daddy.
Oh.
built that house, and the one that the Parsons lived in too. That was a Chapman home.
I see. Well, now, Mr. John Chapman had a brother named Jim Chapman.
Yeah.
He went on down to Macomb City and was a foreman down there. Because in the IC magazine up there the other day at Ole Miss, back in the 29 or 30s, a picture of his wife who died. Or was it John Chapman? It was John Chapman's wife who died.
No, it was Jim.
Jim? What was her name? She sounded...
She was from Holly Springs.
Yeah.
And she's buried in Holly Springs.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I don't think I remember her.
Got a picture in there.
She was there. I think I do remember her too, slightly. But John Chapman's wife was a very pretty woman, a slender woman with smooth, dark brown hair and pretty brown eyes and white, clear skin. And she had the nicest manners. She was from New Orleans. Her name was Cheryl. Millie Cheryl. Millicent was her name, called her Millie. Millie Cheryl. And she had a brother, Eddie Cheryl, who lived here. And they lived one time across the street from where Wiley Walker lived.
Yeah.
In that little house, a smaller house than it is now. They had one child, Elsie, and she died when she was 4 or 5 years old, and they had one child. And all the rest of the time they had owned that house. The last house the Baptist Church tore down north.
Yeah.
They owned that and lived there. But after, I think after old Mr. and Mrs. Chapman died, they moved into Chapman home with Miss Annie Chapman Spencer, who was a widow and lived there before.
And that was, Annie Chapman Spencer was a sister to...
Jim Chapman.
Yeah.
Now, Jim Chapman got fired off the railroad. What about? You know, he worked for Sid Milbuck in Jackson. He retired.
No, I didn't know that. That's
did.
fired, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that.
And I don't know.
I'm sure Mr. Bob Ward told me one time, but I don't remember. It's somehow or other he didn't, and when he talked about these people, he didn't favor Jim Chapman like he did Mr. John Chapman. He liked him. And Mr. Roy really liked him. Did the Chapmans have any children, the John Chapmans? I don't remember ever hearing of it.
No. They were the one that had the one child, Elsie.
Oh, I thought it was the sheriff.
Well, Ms. Chapman was Cheryl.
Yeah.
She was the one that had one child.
I see.
And they had a monument for that child. They arranged for him. They died for one of them to be buried on one side of that child and the other one on the other side of it.
Ooh.
3 of them up there that way with one monument now. Georgia, Missouri Red Monument in back in the cemetery.
Isn't that funny? Much as I thought of Mr. John Chapman, I don't remember going to his funeral. He lived up into the 50s, didn't he?
Yeah, he died suddenly at Paducah, and the Chapmans always kind of, the older ones. Old man John Chapman finally became a Roman Catholic. He was born a Methodist. And his wife was always a Baptist. She was a Lewis, where she was from. But then, John Chapman, I remember he used to go to Baptist Sunday school, but he finally converted to Roman Catholicism. Our association with his wife, she was an ardent Roman Catholic.
Oh, she was. Being from New Orleans, yeah.
New Orleans. And John Chapman joined the Catholic Church, and Annie was Annie Spencer. Joined the Catholic Church when she was young. We had started in that part of the family. Miss Chapman's mother married an old Irishman. She got a monument up here, got his name. But he was a widower, and he had a daughter. Her name was Mamie. And she and Annie were near the same age, and they were great cronies. And Annie joined the Catholic Church way back there when she was a girl. And old man John Chapman's daddy, Hardly catch up to it. He was an old man.
That's unusual. That's fantastic, really.
They turned me all John Pettis. They told Miss Chapman, one thing about being a Baptist, because because she was Baptist, died in the war.
Full-blooded, huh?
Yeah. And she always attended. She walked with a limp, had a little limp on one side.
Well, Mr. John Chapman would be proud that his name is being perpetuated by John Chapman Pullens. That's why John Chapman got his name. And you don't you worry about Hall Pullens ever having a job in Paducah. They laid off a lot of folks, but they didn't lay off Hall Pullens. He was taking care of that job.
Let's see. That Butler. Boy, named McLean.
Yeah.
Butler.
Yep.
Had one named Edward and Grady.
Yeah, I went to school with
Grady lives over at Oakland now.
Edwin Earl. I went to school with Edwin Earl. Mm-hmm. And that one over at Oakland is he's the son of Butler in the air.
He's Grady.
Colonel Butler. There was a beautiful girl too. What was her name? I've heard of her.
Georgia.
And
Billy. They both sang so well. And they lived over there. Ma and Ray lived. And I sat out on the porch for many afternoon and night, every night, listening to him sing. He was just a beautiful voice.
Well, they must have been a rather cultured family of some kind.
Well, they were old folks went.
Huh.
Just regular run. I was trying to tell you about old man Butler. I thought he was one that said he had maybe all the children performing in the shop.
Yeah.
I can't think of what his name was. But McLean, and Frank McLean was a young foreman in the shop.
Well, he was up at Paducah when I got there in 1940, I believe. He was a foreman.
I can't remember Butler children being named. Maybe what's the name of any other Pullens children?
Well, he didn't. Barney.
Is that his real name?
Yeah, that's his real name. And Irene. That's about all of them. Oh no, there's Raymond. And then old Allen. Allen's the oldest, Allen Pullens.
Old Hall Pullens, did you know him?
Yes, sir.
He'd tell you a joke and he'd laugh his own joke, and by the time he got to the crux of the thing, he'd hit you in the chest with the flat of his fist and then he'd knock you silly.
He used to get on 101 at Paducah on Saturday night, and that old overcoat he wore, all except July and August, he'd take it off. And he wore it because he could carry half a pint in each pocket, see. Time we got to Fulton, he was usually pretty well loaded. And he'd get on number one, and the war was getting ready to start over in Europe, and he was obsessed with old Hilton. He couldn't say Hitler. He called him old Hilton. And he'd find the most dignified lady on the train and go sit down by her and start telling her what he thought about old Hilton. And then he'd get carried away and he'd slap on the leg or something, and boy, she'd send for that conductor and old Hall and have to go somewhere else. Everybody knew him. And so help me, Fred, by the time we got to Grenada, lots of nights, he couldn't even move. And they'd carry him way on down somewhere and put him off. And the folks at home wouldn't ever see him. He'd be on number 4 Sunday afternoon, sobering up.
Going back.
Yeah, haul him back to Paducah. Nasty.
Getting him coming here, old man J.I. Vaughn's wife died, and he got word that this woman down there, he was married. And he went down there and married Hall Pullens' sister.
Oh, is that the way it was?
And then Hall came up here and married one of his, had 2 old maid girls there. Maudie, who's the one that married Hall Pullens, and the other's name, Maudie, and I think that was her name. Now, she married a fellow named Greenwood, and lived over in Alabama, kind of in the Columbus area. Yeah. But old man John, old man J.I. Vaughns, Character.
Was he really?
He's miles on it. You know. Money was his God. He just worked all that family children. He got never death, trying to get a hold of money.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about him. He also outfigured his hands with a pencil, too, didn't he? Pretty bad.
Yeah, he would,
they all did that.
He asked him about his new wife and came downtown. Came down there. He was going down to the hardware store and get him a can opener. Well, yeah, had on a pair of 10 britches and you want to get in. Can't open up.
Oh, well, now, let's see. Where does Houston fit into that bunch?
Which Houston?
Houston, Vaughns.
Well, Houston is the son of John, and John is the son of J.I. by first marriage over in Alabama.
I see.
John was the older half brother of all that crowd of children old man J.I. had by this Pendergrass woman. Old man J.I. was not a terrible father.
Where did he live?
Here, west town.
Yeah, that's right.
He had lived years before down there where those Pullens live now.
Yeah.
That's where they got that land. He owned a good lot of that land in there.
That's right. They had a gin at one time, didn't they?
All right out here at the west side of town, down that hollow where there's from Lou McNamee's.
Yeah.
There's a big spring down there from the steam run gin.
Well, that's why that spring's down there now, yeah. Oh, the
That's
spring
why
was
the gin
there.
was down there.
Yeah, why the gin was down
They
there.
had a pond there.
Well, these Vaughn boys up here, Rural and them, they grandsons of...
Yeah,
of that old...
their dad was named Will.
Will, that's right.
Will had a store.
That's right. W.C. Vaughn.
Right. Charlie Vaughn was one of them.
But you know, somewhere in the railroad magazines up there, I've run across the name of that fellow, Ed Shearer. Did he work for the railroad? Eddie.
E-D-D-I, Eddie Shearer. He was a machinist.
Well, that's what it is. Then he's on one of these pictures I got. That's what it is. All right.
He went back to New Orleans, I think.
Yeah.
I remember him.
Elizabeth provided me with a list of names that she picked up over yonder in the marriage record. And I'm going to run through them and see how many of these folks that you can call to your memory and anything about them. I'm looking at my machine. Look at the names of Swedish families that she ran across. Nordstrom. We've talked about the Berglund. And then there's Anders Doter, D-O-T-E-R. She's got that's then Swenson, S-W-N-S-O-N. Several Johnsons, and you mentioned Oscar Johnson.
Well, his uncle was old man Charlie Johnson.
I've got a picture of him.
Just west of the Main Street Methodist Church.
Where does Swede Mays figure in there? His mother was a Johnson.
His
wasn't
mother
she?
was the only child of old man Charlie Johnson.
I see. Now Anderson, I know who Charlie Anderson was. He was a conductor, but he must have been the second generation.
That Anderson was conductor, wasn't that man's son. There was a Charlie Anderson. It was his son, old man Anderson lived in, you know where Andrew Barrett
Yeah.
lived? That was Mr. Anderson's home.
Uh-huh.
And his son lived in the house north of it. It was built on the same style.
What was the son's name?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Old man Anderson's name was
August?
Huh?
August Anderson?
Old Miss Anderson called him Nyberg.
Nyberg. Uh-huh. The next name I see is Ny.
On his monument up at Cemetery, I believe it was Andrew Anderson.
Andrew Anderson. Nylander. Remember any Nylander?
Yeah, Nylander. John Nylander was a painter, and other Nylanders, old man Joe Strolling's second wife was Nylander, I think. Nylander was a run down the hill set of folks. Old man John had lost his arm working for J.J. White at Macomb City in the mill. And they lived, Grandma Wade lived where Miss Milstead lives with a grove lot of oaks and elms out in front of the house. And the house sat way back. It was a very ordinary house, but it sat a long way from the street, and it was originally the home of this person I mentioned, the fellow Knox.
Uh-huh.
But then the Nylanders lived just west of them, over there where Oswald Brooks built that brick house.
Yeah.
And they'd get in a screaming, hollering, fight over there one day. And I don't know what one of them told this Augusta, the youngest girl, he was going to do to her. He said, no, you won't. No, you won't. Said, when you do, streetcars will be running on the factory road.
What about Olson, the LSON?
Yes, sir. Old man Olson had a store in that building and owned the building there where, right across the Methodist Church. Don Holloway puts his signs up on the side of it.
Yeah.
He owns it now as Mr. Olson's paint store.
Well, in 1905, that street scene picture I got up there shows a big store sitting over there.
Olson.
And I was thinking that's where the photo studio was.
No, it was north of there, right next to the Masonic Temple, right where that film station is.
Oh.
And Mr. Olson lived up yonder. He owned those two houses up there, south of the Catholic Church Rectory.
Yeah.
And they lived in one of them. I think they lived in the south one. And Dick Reynolds must have rented them as soon as they moved to New Orleans and stayed there as long as he stayed.
I always thought it was his house.
He rented so long.
Ah, but dog. Well, you know, they told us when we moved in the old Peter J. Gaffney house, everybody thought it belonged to the old man, and it belonged to the McFarlands all the time.
So long, I know that.
Yeah. What about Edstrom?
Well, they lived in the house and owned the property where Jack, his name there, but he touched his wife's sister.
What have you got in
Right across the street from the Andersons.
Oh, yeah. Old Heffler. Jack Heffler.
That was the Edstrom home.
Edstrom home.
Edstrom home, and the north part of it was just a vacant lot. And Mr. Hathaway owned that, bought it, and he built those two houses on it. But I remember when they used to pass their buggy horse on those lots where the next two houses are.
You mean where Taylor Howard's house is and where Mr. Hathaway's house? Do you remember them?
No, Taylor Howard's house was on the Larson lot. The Larson boys, he's now dead. Their daddy owned that big burning. But just south of that, where Miss Henry lives,
yeah,
and that where one of the Miss Persons lives.
Yeah.
They were Hathaway house.
I see. Mr. Tom Hathaway. George, yes, sir.
Hathaway,
yeah, he was a brother to the Bill Hathaway that got killed up yonder in Middleborough.
Bill Hathaway was Topsy Hathaway's daddy, and
Miss Turner.
And Miss Turner, what's her name?
Well, sir, I know it as well as I know you.
Yeah. Anyhow, they were sisters. They were children of the rest.
Their mother was a Boylston or a Bartlett or something? Boylston. Well, now here's a name that some folks came here one time and asked me about, and I told them I never heard of anybody living here, a Swede named Bergerson.
Yes, so he was the first foreman of the car shop.
First foreman of the car shop.
And I knew those people coming, and you know, what's that old boy's name? He was right along to start the side, and they quit coming. Did a lot of research in those cemeteries after because they did run a picture show down there. What's his name?
McRae.
McRae. His wife asked me about Bergersons. She said, I've got some older pictures of the Bergersons. I told them about those folks having, she didn't know a thing about them. I said, those folks should have been glad to get a hold of them.
Oh, yeah, I wish I could come up with the address of those people. I'd write them. Carlson's now, I know a little bit. I knew Miss Carlson in Paducah.
She was the widow of Albert Carlson, but the old Carlson home was right there in that same house that we overhauled, that we own now, right next to that drive-in film station. We got to sell the house off the lot.
It's where I thought Oscar Johnson lived there.
He did.
Yeah.
But they bought it from Carlson heirs.
Yeah.
And overhauled it.
Yeah, and the Carlson an earlier generation of these Carlsons, one of them died in the fire at the shop in 91.
It's the father
Of Albert.
Yeah. A wall collapsed.
That's right.
What year was that, 91?
91. And I've often told people that. I said, now, to show you the difference. Those old men love their jobs, and they worked hard, but the shop meant a lot to them. And he wanted to throw that last bucket of water on that fire, just in my imagination. Nowadays, these guys working will get off in the shade and say, let the son of a bitch burn. That's exactly what they do. But I liked Frank and it was Frank, David, James, Alberta, and the
Albert's children.
Yeah.
Now, who you got next there?
Cedarburg.
I don't know, didn't know the Cedarburgs.
Yeah.
I knew Cedar Hall.
Well, that's over here on the next page. Erickson.
Yeah, the Ericksons.
Rudolph folks.
Yeah. Now, they didn't come with the Swedish colony.
Oh.
They came individually, and they came down here from Bolivar, Tennessee. That's where they lived.
Well, how about that?
Before we moved here.
But you know, I run into an Erickson running on the road here back in the 1880s because he had a famous wreck at Eskridge. Because old man Everett, who cleaned up many wrecks on this railroad, tells of a head-on crash that Engineer Erickson was killed at Eskridge.
Well, now, there was Andrew Erickson was the father of those Erickson Jr. And he had a brother who built a house, and